Good, good afternoon. Try to get my voice here. Okay, I'm going to try to try not to be too ambitious, but just try to identify a few things that might go forward here at this CSD in terms of this 10-year framework, and I'm going to try to frame things in terms of that, of this situation we're at right now at the CSD. I like this picture here of the possibility of going different directions. That's not a road. Okay. I was listed here as being from the International Coalition for Stable Production and Consumption, ICPAC. Actually, my board would be very unhappy with that because I'm really from the Integrative Strategies Forum. And the ICPAC is a voluntary association of people who've been working on stable production consumption going back to the World Summit on Sustainable Development. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but it was essentially founded in 2001, coming out of the Sustainable Production Consumption Caucus here at CSD. The goal is basically to build community among the people who are working in this area and to foster cooperation and mutual support within this global movement to make this change towards sustainable economies. So one choice in terms of this, this track is the business as usual choice. Of course, there's all these scenarios building, and you've already seen this picture, and I hope nobody gets mad at me for using it, but without their permission. But the business as usual has its costs, and we know what a lot of those are, and we've seen them, and they've been driving the processes that have brought us here today. One of the organizations I work with, the Citizens Network, was specifically formed to bring Americans down to Rio at the Earth Summit, and that's where a lot of the language we're using now about consumption here at the UN comes out of Agenda 21. You've seen this probably many times over the last 15 or almost 18 years now. But basically that the cause of all these different kinds of issues that are plaguing us are rooted in production consumption patterns, and that governments have this responsibility to do something about it. The urgent need, vitally essential, and each country is obligated back, this goes back to 1992, of developing a national policy framework that will encourage this shift to more sustainable patterns of production consumption. So we don't have to be asking for them to consider us anything. These were all commitments, agreements done quite some time ago. And quite some time ago, there was agreement that we need to develop new concepts of wealth and prosperity, and that these need to be integrated into the way we do business, into our national accounts and indicators of progress. 1992. So, 10 years later, at the World Summit on Sustainable Development in 2002, there was a review of what kind of progress we've made since Rio, and one of the conclusions was that there's an implementation gap, that actually for all the progress in eco-efficiency and awareness raising, that the trends have gotten worse. The ecological and social trends have gotten worse. And we know they're continuing to get worse. So the WSSD was basically dealing with this challenge of implementation. Okay, that was 8 years ago. And the footprint keeps growing. And in terms of dealing with that, there's this recognition that in terms of the definition of sustainable development, that one of the overarching objectives of sustainable development is to change these production consumption patterns. And so as part of the WSSD, there was a mandate to develop a 10-year framework of programs in support of regional and national initiatives to accelerate the shift towards sustainable consumption and production. as we're here, what I've noticed is that some of the pieces of that have kind of lost. Now I'm going to come back to IcePack, because back at Johannesburg, when we got started, we wrote a report called Waiting for Delivery. And that was referring to Rio, referring to the domestic policy frameworks of each country, to a lot of the things that were there in terms of new concepts of wealth and addressing this urgent necessity, this urgent priority. And we did a session there when we launched this report called The World in 2012, towards a 10-year plan to achieve sustainable production consumption. Well, we're getting really close to that now. And here we are reviewing our progress over the last 8 years. So we came out with another report which, you know, for lack of other kind of creative, poetic thoughts and everything, we came up with Still Waiting for Delivery. And it basically kind of gives a little bit of a history, because that's something that tends to happen, especially in these kinds of events. And we forget about all the work and discussions and ideas that have already taken place, and we start to kind of come up with new things like, oh, life cycle analysis, we should promote that, as if it's a new idea. And some of these other things, they're like they're new ideas. Well, these aren't so new. So, looking back and looking forward, we want to get situated. Well, what can we do? And what can we do right now over the next week or two or next year? Here we are, CSD 18 question. And I've been listening carefully, you know, to the discussions. A lot of discussions about how important sustainable production consumption is and sustainability. And I'm listening, okay, what kind of programs are the governments and the international community, and that includes us, major groups and all, what are we going to develop that's going to support the work, the movement of all these initiatives and organizations, practices out there to support it? Not to solve all the problems, but to provide some support. What are we going to put on the table? Because this is the year for that. I mean, after 8 years, you know, is it going to happen or not? So where are these programs, these new programs of support? There's been work. There's been task forces. There's been consultations and forums, and there's been work that's been done. But what are these programs that of this 10-year framework? It's still kind of abstract. And so right now, then there's this other question, well, who needs them? Do we really need any programs of support? Who needs programs of support? Well, this is a kind of simple diagram of these different points where different people are working. There's a lot of work going on. Thousands and thousands of initiatives addressing different aspects of production consumption in different sectors, in energy, food, water, in the household. In the household, and they're dealing with different aspects. In the production side, to develop clean and safe goods that don't create harm. On the consumption side, paying attention to what the impacts of our consumption of our goods. We know all these things. I don't have to go through them, but I did want to point to one thing in this little diagram here is at the center, because this is a diagram we've used to sort of as a little compass for thinking about, you know, who's doing what where, and driving all these different decision points in the production consumption cycle are values. It's a sense of need, what's important, and the translation of that into some kind of a judgment about what to do. And so for our thinking, I mean, you notice that this is a little bit like life cycle analysis, the life cycle. And it is, except the approach here that we've been taking is not starting from the product and what kind of impacts does it have, you know, in its life cycle, but we've kind of started from the other end of looking at these trends, all these things that are happening, and trying to look back at what are the production consumption patterns that are causing them, and then who's working, what are the strategies and practices addressing different parts of production consumption, who's working on that, because we want to align with them, and we want to see if we can formalize this and build this movement.